Imagine being 18, thrown into muddy trenches, dodging bullets, gas, and rats, with survival measured in weeks, not years. That's World War I, and we're diving right in.
This is you. Now, you're probably wondering how you ended up here. Well, let me tell you. There were over 30 countries involved in World War I, but you're born in the United States. Your childhood takes place in the early 1900s. Being a kid back then looked a lot different than it does now. It was common for children as young as 5 or 6 to work in factories, farms, or in mines to help support the family. A lot of families back then couldn't afford to feed or have clothes for their children without additional income. Children were perfect to work in places like these because they were small and could fit into places adults couldn't. Plus, children got paid less, so of course owners of these companies loved to hire children.
So basically, childhood in the early 1900s was less Saturday morning cartoons and more coal dust ASMR. It's wild. Kids as young as 5 were literally crawling inside machines like they were side characters in Honey, I Shrunk the Labor Force. And factory owners, they loved it. Cheap, tiny workers who didn't complain much. It's like capitalism discovered DLC skins for employees. Smaller, cheaper, expendable. Imagine swapping Roblox for actual box factories. Yeah, childhood hit different.
I mean, what rich guy doesn't want cheap labor? By the time you reached 18, you finally reached the age where you were able to join the army. It was 1914 and you were one of the total 4.8 million United States soldiers that served in World War I. To enter the war, you had to be at least 18 years old and have your parents' consent. But it's believed that up to hundreds of thousands of US soldiers lied about their age to be able to fight for their country. In 1917, the US officially had their first draft. Men had to be between the ages of 21 and 31. 1 year later, on June 5, 1918, the registration was for men who had just turned 21 the year before, and only 2 months later, the draft expanded for men between the ages of 18 and 45. By the time it was all said and done, 72% of all US soldiers that served in World War I were from the draft. Imagine being on the couch eating chips watching TV one day, and the next day, bullets are flying over your head. Yeah, it wasn't very fun to be drafted. Luckily, you and me don't have to worry about any of that. Or at least, I hope not. The life expectancy of a trench soldier might be the lowest I've ever seen. After being assigned to fight in the trenches, you could assume you would live for, 6 weeks. Yeah, you heard that right. 6 whole weeks.
The draft really was the ultimate surprise subscription service, like you didn't sign up, but congratulations, you're now getting weekly bullets instead of Netflix. What's crazier is so many kids lied about their age just to fight. Like, war was the hottest new Fortnite skin drop. And that trench life expectancy, 6 weeks, that's shorter than most free trial periods. Imagine getting handed a rifle knowing your expiration date was basically milk in July.
So just know if you're ever told to fight in the trenches, you might as well just get your will ready and say goodbye to your mom. In World War I, somewhere between 15 to 22 million people died, and the US alone lost over 116,000. After you joined the army, you underwent basic training, which was physically demanding. Training often took place in camps or military barracks, and soldiers were taught how to march, shoot, and handle weapons. But trust me, none of what you were training for right now would prepare you for the trenches. Some of the weapons you learned how to use were the Springfield M1903 rifle, the M1917 Browning machine gun, the Model 1897 pump-action shotgun, and the M1917 grenade, which was a lemon-shaped hand grenade that exploded about 4 to 5 seconds after the pin was pulled. It was designed for use in close combat and was used to clear enemies out of trenches or bunkers. Just remember that after you pull the pin, you better throw that thing quickly or you're turning into 1,000 tiny human pieces.
The animation style here feels so authentic because of its simplicity, like a talented kid made it. It doesn't overcomplicate things with flashy detail, which actually makes the horror of 6-week shelf life soldiers hit harder, but also funnier.
You also had artillery weapons to learn how to use and deal with. These big guys were one of the most devastating weapons used in World War I. The M1917 75mm field gun and the M1980 155mm howitzer. I mean, I don't have much to say about these things. Look at them. No one stood a chance. The world's first ever operational tank was also made during World War I. It was a revolutionary weapon designed to break through trench warfare. Everybody was too busy fighting in the trenches, you wouldn't move, so the tank had to be created to make any sort of progress. These early tanks were heavily armored and armed with machine guns, and they could cross difficult terrain like barbed wire, mud, and shell craters. But by far the worst thing you had to learn how to use was a gas mask. Chemical warfare, mainly the use of mustard gas and chlorine gas, became the worst part of World War I. Hold on one second, let me just put my mask on real quick. Oh, there we go. Sorry. The gas mask was developed to protect soldiers from chemical agents. It was made of rubberized cloth with a filter and was issued to troops in the event of gas attacks. While it was not perfect, it did help reduce casualties caused by gas warfare. The widespread use of poison gas during World War I led to the international ban on its use in warfare, the use of asphyxiating, poisonous, or other gases in war, essentially banning gas as a weapon due to the horrors experienced in World War I. But unfortunately for you, you're still in the middle of World War I, and your country needs you, so go get 'em, champ.
Artillery, tanks, and poison gas. Basically the holy trinity of no thanks. Those early tanks looked like metal toasters on treads, but they changed everything, smashing through barbed wire like it was wet spaghetti. And the gas masks? Terrifyingly iconic, rubberized cloth that made every soldier look like a post-apocalyptic bug. It's insane that mustard gas was so bad, humanity literally said, yeah, never again.
Most of the soldiers being sent out to the trenches were between 18 to 25. And remember, a lot of these guys were probably younger, lying about their age. By the time you arrive at the front, you are thrust into a world of mud, disease, and death. The trenches, often dug into the ground to provide some form of protection from enemy fire, were overcrowded, filthy, and poorly equipped. There was little space to move, sleep, or even breathe without the stench of decay and the constant threat of death. Trenches were often flooded with rainwater. Soldiers could stand in water up to their knees, leading to trench foot. And if you don't know what trench foot is, trust me, don't look it up. Just take my word for it that it's not pretty. Rats, fleas, lice, and other vermin were basically your roommates. Soldiers lived among them, and rats often fed on the bodies of the dead. The battlefield was covered with the bodies of the dead, both your own soldiers and enemies. Clean water, food, and supplies were rare to come by. Soldiers often went without proper hygiene for weeks. You probably weren't brushing your teeth, you couldn't shower very often, if any at all, and you definitely didn't have any deodorant. I don't know if I'd rather smell all these guys in the trench or be one of the dead bodies on the ground right there. Either way, I'm just glad I'm not you. You face the constant threat of enemy fire, artillery shelling, and gas attacks. The trenches were often extremely close to the enemy lines, and snipers would target anyone who exposed themselves outside of their trenches. This led to what is known as shell shock, now known as PTSD, causing mental and emotional breakdowns. This is one of the most famous images that showcases just how bad shell shock really affected these soldiers, which included symptoms like uncontrollable shaking, disorientation, and mental breakdowns. I mean, you're tired, cold, and have bullets and mortars flying at you. I think I would go crazy too. And if you thought it couldn't get worse, well, you'd be wrong. One of the most horrific parts of trench warfare was leaving the safety of the trenches and being forced to attack the enemy. Soldiers would charge over the top of the trenches, running into open fields known as no man's land, exposed to machine gun fire, artillery, and barbed wire. The over-the-top attack was a way to break through the enemy's defenses and advance, but it was basically a death sentence.
Trenches sound less like battle strategy and more like the world's worst Airbnb, mud floors, rat roommates, no running water, and a bonus feature called trench foot. Soldiers were basically marinating in misery while snipers turned every peek over the edge into a gamble. And shell shock? That was the original patch notes for PTSD, except nobody had therapy DLC yet.
The main point of these attacks was to capture enemy trenches and move the front line forward. The idea was to overwhelm your enemies with all of you running over at once. But as you can probably guess, it didn't work very often. And not only did it not work, but also most of the soldiers going over the top would die. You were exposed to heavy machine gun fire, artillery bombardments, and snipers as they ran across no man's land. Even if soldiers were able to reach the enemy trenches and weren't mowed down, even more would die in the trenches in hand-to-hand combat or just captured and tortured. No soldier actually wanted to go over the top. They were forced to, and soldiers had shell shock just thinking about going out in the open in no man's land to basically die. The psychological effect of knowing you eventually had to go over the top to your death definitely didn't help you sleep at night. And I haven't even gotten into how bad chemical weapons really were. Germans first released a chlorine gas that created a yellow-green cloud that swept across the battlefield in 1914. Over time, other chemicals were developed and used, including phosgene gas and mustard gas. Chlorine gas caused severe irritation to the respiratory system, leading to coughing, choking, and suffocation. Exposure could damage the lungs, causing death by drowning as the lungs filled with fluid. Phosgene gas was even more deadly than chlorine. It caused damage to the lungs, leading to fluid buildup and suffocation. The effects of phosgene exposure were often delayed for several hours, meaning soldiers might inhale the gas and not realize the full extent of the damage until it was too late.
Over the Top was basically the worst group project ever. Everyone runs forward, 90% don't make it, and the survivors get hand-to-hand combat as a reward. Add chemical weapons to the mix, and it's pure nightmare fuel. Chlorine gas looked like a creepy green fog machine from hell, while phosgene was sneakier, giving soldiers hours before they realized their lungs were filling like busted fish tanks. Imagine the psychological toll. You're already doomed sprinting across no man's land, and now the air itself is trying to kill you.
Many victims died a slow and agonizing death from suffocation. And mustard gas, also known as sulfur mustard, was one of the most notorious gases. It could cause blistering of the skin and mucous membranes, including the eyes, nose, and throat. It could burn soldiers alive, leaving them with horrific blisters that took weeks or months to heal. Exposure to this could lead to blindness, permanent scarring, and damage to the lungs, often resulting in long-term respiratory problems. The worst part about mustard gas was that it could linger in the environment for days, especially in wet conditions, making areas hazardous long after an attack had ended. The goal of chemical weapons were aimed at breaking the stalemate of trench warfare by creating fear, disorienting soldiers, and forcing them out of their trenches. Soldiers were always worried about chemical attacks. Unlike artillery or bullets, chemical weapons could be released in ways that were hard to predict. Gas clouds could blow across no man's land, and soldiers would often have little or no time to prepare. When gas attacks occurred, it was common for soldiers to panic and scramble for gas masks or seek shelter. You and other soldiers knew that exposure to gas could lead to agonizing death or permanent injury. Gas masks became a huge part of your equipment. However, these masks were not foolproof and could be uncomfortable, difficult to wear for extended periods, and sometimes ineffective against the more deadly gases. Soldiers who were unable to get to safety or were trapped in a gas attack without a mask often suffered the worst deaths imaginable. About 1.3 million people were affected by chemical weapons during World War I, with over 90,000 deaths attributed directly to gas attacks.
Mustard gas was like the final boss of trench warfare. Slow, lingering, and cruel. It didn't just kill, it burned people alive, left them blinded, scarred, or coughing for the rest of their lives. The fact it could stick around for days made the battlefield feel like a cursed map in a video game, respawning danger every time it rained. No wonder soldiers panicked at the first whiff of it. Honestly, mustard gas turned World War I into less of a battle and more of a horror survival game without a quit button.
Although the number of chemical weapons deaths was far lower than the deaths caused by artillery or gunfire, the suffering they caused was unlike any other weapon used at the time. The likelihood you survived was pretty low. Like I said earlier, the life expectancy of a trench soldier in World War I was about 6 weeks. But if you somehow survived, life wasn't getting much better for you. I mean, just look at this poor guy before and after war. Soldiers returning home often struggled to reintegrate into normal life. Many returned to broken families, disconnected from loved ones who couldn't understand the trauma and all the damage the war had done to you. The horrors of the trenches had changed you, and the world you returned to seemed strange and difficult to adjust to. A lot of soldiers struggled with unemployment, homelessness, and societal neglect. Not to mention your body was destroyed. You had scars, lost limbs, or permanent damage from the trenches and gas. You could be blind, have breathing problems, or even trench foot. So even though you didn't die in the war, it wouldn't take long after for those injuries to finally take you down. It honestly might have been better if you just died during the first day of the war instead of going through all that. But unfortunately for you, you were born as a World War I trench soldier. So, good luck.
Trench life was basically humanity's crash course in how far misery can go. Mud, rats, gas, and trauma that followed soldiers long after the fighting stopped. Surviving didn't mean winning, it meant dragging pieces of yourself back home to a world that barely understood what you went through. Brutal, raw, and unforgettable. This video captured that nightmare so well. Seriously, he made a great video. Check him out, links in the description. And next time, let's just say we're diving into another corner of nerdy stuff you won't see coming. Stay nerdy.